You know, it's funny, when you look at a photograph of a river, it looks incredibly peaceful.
Right, yeah, like a pristine nature calendar or something.
Exactly. But it's entirely static. It's just this two-dimensional snapshot that's frozen in time, capturing like just a single millisecond of reality.
You can observe the beauty of it, sure, you can appreciate the composition, but you don't actually feel the reality of what that river is. You're completely insulated from its power.
Right. But if you actually, take off your shoes and step into a physical river, your entire relationship with it changes instantly.
Oh, totally. You feel the force of it right away.
Yeah, you feel that kinetic energy pushing against your legs, kind of threatening your balance. It isn't just an object you're looking at anymore. It's this relentless active force that demands a physical response from you.
I love that imagery.
Yeah.
And that exact difference, between a static picture and a kinetic force, that is the exact lens the author, Josh Xavier, uses to redefine how we view ancient texts in his book.
Right. The book is called The River, and the subtitle is God in Motion, which I think is just brilliant. So welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us, our mission today is to explore this profound, highly visual text together.
Yeah, and Xavier brings such a fascinating perspective to this material. He really does.
It does, because he isn't approaching these ancient texts as like a traditional theologian or a historian.
No, not at all. His professional background is heavily rooted in graphic design, motion design, and video editing. So he literally looks at the world through, vectors and velocity and keyframes.
Which completely alters how he reads ancient manuscripts. I mean, for Xavier, these words aren't just static history frozen on a page like that photograph we were talking about.
Exactly. His whole in-motion perspective forces him to look at the underlying mechanics of the text.
Right.
He sees these narratives as dynamic, moving realities. He treats the concept of the divine not as a noun, but as a verb.
A verb. I love that. And our core objective today is to really unpack his central thesis from the first two chapters of the book. He argues that the river mentioned repeatedly throughout biblical scripture isn't just a recurring, poetic metaphor.
Right. It's not just a series of different bodies of water popping up randomly just to set a nice scene.
Yeah, exactly. He tracks it as one continuous, evolving flow of divine presence. It shifts from a physical location to, well, eventually an internal human reality.
A single current moving through human history.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can track where this kinetic energy is going, we have to establish where it begins, right? So where does this river originate?
Well, to understand where it's going, we definitely have to start at the origin. And Xavier starts this whole tracking shot, so to speak, at the very beginning of the chronological narrative. Right.
So
the Garden of Eden.
The Garden of Eden. But he asks us to kind of strip away the old Sunday school flannel graph version of Eden, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He insists that we have to stop looking at Eden as merely a geographical location on an ancient map.
Right, like it wasn't just a physical plot of land where you could drop a pin on Google Maps.
Right. Xavier defines Eden primarily as an environment, specifically an environment of completely unhindered fellowship between the human and the divine.
Calling it an environment changes the entire framing for me. It moves Eden from a vacation destination you might visit to an atmospheric condition that you exist within.
Yes, exactly.
Like a terrarium perfectly calibrated for life.
That's a perfect way to put it. And within that perfectly calibrated environment, the text in Genesis says that a river went out of Eden to water the garden.
So we're looking at Genesis chapter 2 here.
Right, Genesis 2.8 through 10. And Xavier argues we have to look past the literal H2O here. Like, if Eden is the epicenter of divine presence, then the river flowing out from it is the physical manifestation of that presence.
So it's the delivery system.
Exactly. It's the delivery system for divine life.
Yeah.
Actively sustaining every single thing it touches.
Wow. So it's literally the mechanism of that unhindered fellowship.
Yeah, it's a constant, uninterrupted stream of life. And Xavier makes this really profound point about the nature of this current. He says that in Eden, because life flowed continuously from the ultimate source, there was absolutely no lack.
There's no lack at all.
None. And because there was no lack, there was no striving. Wherever that river went, growth wasn't a struggle. It was just the natural byproduct of being in the current. Fruitfulness was just inevitable.
Man, that concept of no striving, that is such a sharp contrast to the modern human condition.
Oh, tell me about it.
I mean, we are defined by our striving. It sounds like plugging an appliance directly into a limitless power grid rather than running on batteries that constantly need replacing.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, because our entire existence right now feels like running on a smartphone battery that's constantly degrading, right? You wake up at 80%, your morning commute drops you to 60, a stressful meeting leaves you at 30.
And you spend the rest of the day with this low-grade anxiety.
Exactly. Desperately looking for a place to recharge before you completely power down.
We are so intimately familiar with depletion, we just accept it as the baseline of reality.
We really do. But Xavier's painting a picture of an environment where humanity wasn't running on a degrading battery. They were plugged directly into that limitless power grid. The river was the grid.
Yeah. The sustenance was direct, it was massive, and it was uninterrupted. You never had to check your battery percentage because the current never fluctuated.
But, and this is the pivotal question, if this river represents perfect provision and unhindered fellowship, what happens when man falls and is driven out of Eden?
Right, the environment shatters.
Yeah. Humanity is removed from that perfectly calibrated terrarium. So, if humanity is expelled from the source and the circuit is broken, what happens to all that kinetic energy? Does the power grid just shut down? Does the river just dry up?
Such a good question. And Xavier points out a crucial theological mechanic here. He says the environment changed like humanity lost access to it.
Yeah.
But the fundamental nature of the divine source did not change. Yeah, you don't turn off a limitless current just because someone unplugs their device.
Yeah.
The kinetic energy doesn't just evaporate.
It just goes underground, I guess.
Basically, yeah, it goes out of sight, but it remains entirely in motion. So instead of the river ceasing, God initiates a greater plan to restore and elevate what was lost.
Okay, so if energy cannot be destroyed, only transferred, then this river has to reemerge somewhere else in the narrative.
Exactly. And since it didn't dry up after the fall of man, we have to look for where it pops up next. Which brings us to a radical shift in location.
Right, moving away from the lush garden setting. So where do we see it next?
We see the current break the surface again in a highly vivid prophetic vision recorded by the ancient prophet Ezekiel.
Okay, so we're jumping to Ezekiel chapter 47 now.
Yep, Ezekiel 47.1 through 12. And the geography is radically shifted. The water is no longer flowing from Eden. In Ezekiel's vision, a trickle of water begins flowing from beneath the threshold of the temple.
The temple. So in the historical context of this ancient text, the temple was the localized epicenter of the divine, right?
Exactly. It was the heavily guarded, physical structure where God's presence was understood to dwell among the people.
Okay, so the source code remains the same. The river originates wherever the divine presence resides. But the behavior of the water in this specific vision is wildly specific.
It really is. Ezekiel describes being led out into this water by a guide. He measures the distance, and at first the water is only ankle deep.
Ankle deep.
Then he measures further out, and the water reaches his knees. Further still, and it hits his waist. Finally, he measures a distance where the water becomes a river so deep and powerful that it cannot be crossed on foot. It requires swimming.
You know, it's exactly like wading into the ocean.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. When you first step off the beach, the water is just washing over your ankles. You have total agency. Your feet are firmly planted on the sand. You have complete balance, and you dictate your own direction.
Right, you're just kind of observing the ocean.
Exactly. You're observing it, maybe using it to cool off, but you are the one in control. But eventually, you go deep enough that the current takes over.
Yeah, the physics of your relationship with the water completely change.
Radically, when it hits your waist, the water becomes this wall of kinetic energy. It starts pushing you. It destabilizes your center of gravity.
And if you go deep enough, your feet leave the sand entirely. You aren't walking anymore. You're at the mercy of the current.
You are being carried. So can you unpack the spiritual meaning behind this specific imagery? Because Xavier spends a lot of time on this.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how Xavier uses that exact progression to explain the psychological and spiritual mechanics of interacting with this divine river. He calls this progression a metaphor for increasing surrender.
Increasing surrender.
Right. The deeper the river gets, the less control a person retains until they are entirely carried by the flow. It marks a shift from just observing the river to actually yielding to it.
And surrender is a terrifying word for modern people. I mean, we spend our entire lives trying to engineer control over our circumstances.
Absolutely. We prefer the ankle-deep water. In the shallows, you can experience the divine on your own terms. You can feel the refreshment, but you retain your autonomy.
And you can step out whenever it gets uncomfortable.
Exactly. But Xavier argues that Ezekiel's vision is a blueprint for a fundamental shift in posture. It maps the journey from wanting the river to serve you to yielding your autonomy to the current completely.
Wow. It is the terrifying transition from using the water to wash your hands to letting the water take you wherever it is going,
Perfectly said.
which immediately demands the question, once you surrender to the current, where is it taking you? According to the text, what is the destination?
Well, in Ezekiel's vision, the geography is staggering. The river flows straight out of the temple, bypasses all the fertile lands, and heads directly into the most barren place imaginable.
Which is
The Dead Sea.
the Dead Sea. Okay, that is the ultimate symbol of lifelessness. I mean, it is so hypersalinated, so toxic to biology that absolutely nothing can survive in it.
Right, it's a terminal lake. Water flows in, evaporates, and leaves nothing but salt and death behind.
It is a geological dead end. So logically, a fresh river flowing into the Dead Sea should just be swallowed up. It should be instantly diluted and neutralized by the overwhelming toxicity of its environment.
You would think so.
Huh.
But the kinetic energy of this specific river operates on different physics.
Okay, tell me more about that.
In the vision, when the river hits the Dead Sea, it doesn't dilute. It fundamentally alters the chemical composition of that terminal lake. The text explicitly says the waters of the sea are healed.
Healed, really?
Yeah. It transforms into a massive ecosystem teeming with swarms of living creatures. Instead of being swallowed by the salt and death, it turns the sea into a place of life. The banks of the river explode with trees that bear fruit continually, and the text notes that even the leaves of these trees possess medicinal healing properties.
Wow, so the leaves bring healing too.
Exactly. And Xavier uses this moment to highlight a massive distinction between the river in Eden and the river in Ezekiel.
Okay, what's the distinction?
Back in Eden, the river was simply sustaining life. It was watering a terrarium that was already perfect. But here, bursting out of the temple and hitting the Dead Sea, the river is restoring and redeeming life.
That is a huge difference.
It is. It is actively invading a toxic environment and reversing the decay. Sustaining an ideal environment requires a completely different kind of power than redeeming a broken one.
That makes so much sense.
Xavier captures the mechanics of this beautifully in the book. There's this critical quote I want to share. He writes, it does not adjust to death, it overcomes it. It does not coexist with barrenness, it transforms it.
It does not coexist with barrenness, it transforms it. That is incredibly powerful.
It really is the core of chapter 2.
Okay, but I want to push back gently here, just to ground this concept for the listener.
Sure, go for it.
I understand the poetic beauty of this ancient vision. I see the motion design logic of the current overcoming the salt, but Xavier is writing this book for a modern reader right now. We have a massive geographical and temporal gap here. Ezekiel is having a vision about a physical temple in Jerusalem that was destroyed centuries ago and a literal Dead Sea in the Middle East. How does Xavier bridge that historical gap? If the river supposedly flows from the threshold of the temple, where is the temple today?
And that geographical gap is the exact tension Xavier uses to introduce the absolute climax of his thesis in chapter 2.
Okay, let's hear it.
He outlines what theologians call the New Covenant shift, but he explains it through the lens of shifting architecture.
Architecture. Okay, unpack that architecture for us.
So, under the old paradigm, the temple was a highly exclusive, stationary, physical structure made of stone and gold. There's a singular point on a map.
Right. If you wanted to interact with the epicenter of the divine presence, you had to make a physical pilgrimage to that specific coordinate.
Exactly. But Xavier argues that in the New Testament narrative, the architecture of the divine fundamentally changes. The temple is no longer a physical building. God now dwells among and within his people.
So the epicenter relocates. It decentralizes.
It completely decentralizes. According to Xavier's reading, the new dwelling place of the divine is the human spirit. The individual person becomes the temple.
Wait, really? That is a staggering paradigm shift. The implications of that are enormous.
Aren't they?
Because if the human spirit is the new temple, and the kinetic energy of the river always originates from the threshold of the temple,
then the river is no longer an external geographical phenomenon. It is no longer confined to a geographical place. It flows from within the human spirit.
so the ultimate source of kinetic energy, that current that refuses to coexist with barrenness and heals toxic environments, is inside of you.
Exactly. It completely internalizes the epic narrative. You don't have to book a flight to Jerusalem, you
Right.
don't have to hike to a secluded mountain, and you don't have to find the perfect architectural space to access the current.
Wow.
Xavier is arguing that for the modern individual, the river of God's presence is an indwelling reality.
We spend billions of dollars as a society trying to find external spaces that will give us peace.
Oh, easily billions.
We go to retreats, we curate our living rooms, we travel to pristine natural environments, all desperately trying to plug our dying batteries into an external socket.
Always searching for the river on the outside.
Yeah. But Xavier is suggesting the power grid has been hardwired into our own internal architecture. We're carrying the current.
We are. And if we connect this back to the imagery of wading into the water, the challenge is no longer about finding the river. The challenge is entirely internal.
It's about yielding to the river that already exists within you, letting the internal water rise from your ankles to your waist, allowing that internal current to sweep away the need for control.
Exactly. And remember the destination of that water. It flows toward the barren places. If the river originates within you, then it first flows into the dead seas of your own internal life.
The burnout, the cynicism, the brokenness.
Yes, and it begins the work of reversing that decay. And once it heals the internal landscape, the kinetic energy doesn't stop.
It flows out of you into the external world, turning the individual into a source of life for the environments they walk into.
Which brings the entire thesis of the book full circle. Xavier's background in motion design really shines here, noting how perfectly the subtitle, God in Motion, captures this thesis. The divine force is never stagnant. It is always moving, expanding, and transforming its environment.
It really is a mesmerizing picture when you step back and look at the sheer scale of the ground we've covered today. Whether you view it through a theological, literary, or historical lens, it's incredible how Xavier manages to connect these disparate historical dots into one cohesive, moving picture.
Yeah, he refuses to let us treat these narratives like a photograph in a museum.
Right. So just to recap for you listening at home, we tracked a divine force that began in an external, localized garden, Eden, a place where humanity enjoyed the current without striving.
Then we watch the architecture shift to a physical building, the temple, where the current took on a new function, actively invading and restoring the lifelessness of the Dead Sea.
And finally, Xavier pulls the camera all the way into the present moment, revealing that the ultimate architectural shift is internal. The kinetic energy hasn't dried up. It has relocated into the internal reality of the individual.
You either fight the current or you lift your feet off the sand and let it carry you.
Exactly, because you can't just casually observe a force like this. The minute you step into it, the kinetic energy demands a response.
It certainly does.
So as we wrap up our exploration of these first two chapters today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own as you go about your week. We spent a lot of time talking about the decentralization of the temple and the internalizing of this river.
Right.
If Xavier's premise holds true, that this ultimate source of life and restoration has progressed from an external garden to an internal reality, what does that mean for how we view sacred spaces today?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. Do we still need to go out searching for a pristine external river to find peace and restoration? Or is it possible that the current is already waiting for us and the only thing left to do is to just let go and surrender to it from within? It's something to deeply consider the next time you feel your battery dropping to zero. Thank you so much for joining us today, for stepping into the current, and for exploring the underlying mechanics of these incredible texts with us. Until next time, keep diving deep.